You've got to think of the law less like a dusty old rulebook and more like a really practical toolkit, right? Every society needs a way to handle disagreements, protect people, and just keep things from falling apart. And the law? Well, that's the set of tools we use to do it. So let's crack open that toolkit and see what's inside. So have you ever wondered about this? I mean, why are all these things treated so differently? Well, the answer gets right to the heart of our toolkit idea. It's simple, really. Our legal system uses different tools for different jobs. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to fix a watch, right? Same idea here. Figuring out which tool gets used for which problem, that's the secret to understanding the whole system.
Okay, so before we start pulling tools out of the box, we need to understand the workshop itself, the foundation it's all built on. And that foundation is this incredibly powerful idea called the rule of law.
And this really is the core idea. It means nobody, and I mean nobody, is above the law. Not you, not me, and especially not the people running the show. It's the simple but revolutionary principle that the rules apply to everyone equally. This is what keeps power in check and gives us a shot at a fair and stable society. It's the bedrock. But, how do you actually make that happen? You can't just cross your fingers and hope that powerful people decide to follow the rules. You need a system, a design. And that's where checks and balances comes in. Think of it as the smart engineering that makes the rule of law actually work in the real world. And here's how they do it. It's pretty brilliant, actually. Power is deliberately split into 3 parts that are independent, but also have to work together. First, you've got the legislature. Their job, they create the law. Then the executive branch comes in to enforce those laws. And finally, the judiciary is there to interpret the law when there are disagreements. Each one keeps an eye on the others, making sure no single branch can just run away with all the power. All right, so we've got our foundation. But around the globe, legal systems have kind of been built from 2 different major blueprints. So let's take a look at these 2 big traditions, common law and civil law. So on one side, you have the common law system, which you'll find in places like the US and the UK. Here, law is kind of built up over time, case by case. Judges' decisions create precedents that become part of the law. The whole process is adversarial. Think of it like a courtroom battle, where 2 sides go at it and the judge is basically a neutral referee. Then, on the other side, you have civil law, which is big in Europe and Latin America. This system is all about detailed written legal codes. And the judge? They're much more of an investigator, actively digging into the facts of the case in what's called an inquisitorial process. But here's what's so important to remember. Even though these 2 systems seem really different, the referee versus the investigator, building on precedent versus following a code, they're both trying to do the same thing, achieve justice. They might take totally different roads, but they often end up at the exact same destination. So now that we have the lay of the land, let's finally get back to our main event. Let's open up that legal toolkit and see exactly what instruments we have to work with. When we open it up, we basically find 3 main trays of tools. We've got criminal law, administrative law, and civil law. And just like in a real toolkit, knowing when to use a hammer versus, say, a screwdriver is absolutely everything. This table breaks it all down so well. Let's start at the top with purpose. Criminal law is about punishment, retribution, and trying to deter others. Civil law, on the other hand, is about making someone whole again, usually with money, compensation. And then there's administrative law, which is all about prevention and regulation, trying to stop the bad thing from happening in the first place. Now look at the next row, focus. This tells you about timing. Both criminal and civil law are ex post. They kick in after the harm is done. But administrative law is special. It's ex ante. It tries to get out ahead of the problem. And finally, who acts? The state, a prosecutor, or an agency drives criminal and administrative law. But civil law? That's started by regular people or companies suing each other. I know this can all sound a little abstract, so let's make it real. Let's say a factory is illegally dumping waste into a river. Now, the legal system has a choice. Do we treat this as a crime and pull out the criminal law tool? Or do we handle it as a regulatory issue using the administrative law tool? That choice has huge consequences.
And here is where the rubber meets the road. Check this out. A study in Belgium looked at almost identical environmental cases and found that the tool of tool really matters to the wallet. On average, criminal courts slapped on fines that were about 2,000 euros higher than the administrative agencies did. So what did that tell us? It shows that the tool you pick directly changes the outcome, because the purpose of that tool, punishment versus regulation, is just fundamentally different.
Okay, so this legal toolkit, it's been built up over centuries. But now, it's facing a challenge it was never, ever designed for: the insane speed of technological change. Let's see how the law is holding up in our new digital world.
Here's the problem in a nutshell. Technology is moving at light speed, while our legal system, by design, moves slowly and carefully. This creates a massive gap, and in that gap, our privacy and our most basic rights are left totally exposed to threats that the people who wrote these laws couldn't have possibly imagined.
And this timeline just shows you how huge that gap has gotten. Get this. Back in 1976, the U.S. Supreme Court basically said that if you voluntarily give your info to a third party, like your bank records, you can't really expect it to be private. Now fast forward to today. Think about it. Almost our entire digital lives, our emails, our photos, our social media, is held by third parties. And that old precedent from 1976, designed for paper bank slips, is now being applied to everything, potentially leaving all our data completely unprotected.
So what happens when a new tech like this creates a totally new kind of problem? I mean, think about it. Is getting tagged without your permission a civil issue where you sue the company? Is it an administrative problem that needs new regulations? Or is it maybe even a criminal act? Our current toolkit doesn't have a specific tool designed for this.
And that brings us to the most important takeaway of this whole thing. The law is not set in stone. It can't be. It has to be a living, breathing system. It has to be a dynamic toolkit that we are constantly sharpening, updating, and adding to, so it can actually handle the real challenges of the world we live in today.
So the real question for all of us isn't if the law has to adapt, it's how. As AI, big data, and constant surveillance become just a normal part of our lives, what new tools do we need to invent? How do we have to change the old ones to make sure our fundamental rights are still protected? The toolkit is in our hands. The challenge now is to keep building it.